You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. You are in today for an inspirational treat. The name of our guest is Colleen Costigan. She's the co-founder and the executive director of Beam Kenya. It's an organization built on the belief that every child deserves the chance to heal, to learn, and to lead. While living a successful corporate life and doing everything right, seemingly, a 1-month volunteer trip to Kenya redirected her future and ultimately became a lifelong commitment for now serving thousands of children in Kenya and beyond through education and mental health support. It's an incredible story, my friends. Get ready for it. Colleen's also a friend. Today, she's going to join us to share how that one quick trip over to Kenya sparked a lifelong calling, why education alone is not enough to break cycles of poverty, and how trauma-informed mental health care can change the trajectory of a child's life. She opens up about meeting a teenage girl named Faith, whose story reshaped Beam's mission, and how heartbreak, perseverance, and hope all coexist when we choose to serve others right where they are as they are. If you've ever felt a tug on your heart that you just could not explain, I think this conversation is going to be for you. You'll leave reminded that small, brave steps can lead to extraordinary impact, that your privilege can become a powerful gift, and that hope is never wasted when it's placed in the hands of love. I have the honor now of introducing you and interviewing my friend, and now yours. Her name is Colleen Costigan. Colleen, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you.
Well, it's my joy to bring a friend onto the podcast. We throw that word around here a lot. After I meet someone one or two times, like I feel like they are my friend. And so I've met a whole lot of friends in this world and on our show. And yet you and I know each other a lot longer ago than just a podcast introduction. I've known your family my entire life. So we're going to back away from Kenya. I know currently you're in the northwest of the United States. We're going to back away even from there, come all the way home to where it all started. So for our listeners and viewers, tell us where you were born and tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Thanks, John, so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really grateful to be here. It's so wonderful to connect with you, and we have so many things in common, and our lives have intertwined in so many ways over the years. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in Glendale specifically, for those of you who are familiar with St. Louis. I went to Mary Queen of Peace. And from there, I went on to St. Joseph's Academy. I followed my sister in her footsteps, who was 4 years older and who I know was a friend of yours in high school. And then from there, I followed my sister again to Boston College. My plan for my life was to be as straight and narrow as it could be, and as evidenced by that path of Mary Queen of Peace to St. Joe to Boston College, and then from there out to San Diego.
I'm gonna pause just for a moment to give context to folks who aren't from this area. So I work in Kirkwood. I live in Webster Groves. These are two just beautiful little communities. And in the middle of these two incredible communities is a remarkable one called Glendale. Houses are beautiful, trees are well trimmed. The school, Mary Queen of Peace, is elite. Families, dogs, white picket fences. It's what folks think of when they think of like kind of the American dream. It is an incredible little place. And so this is your home. That's your family. You talked about your sister, Melissa, my dear friend from high school and college. Like, I love Melissa. She's your older sister. What was it about Melissa and her pathway into St. Joe that you wanted to follow?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, my sister she was confident, she was smart, she was really good at sports. She was a big sister that I really looked up to and admired. And so it just felt natural to follow into her footsteps. She had made good decisions. And so I thought making decisions like her would be a wise way to go, which it really was.
And then into Boston College, again, following her. But that's for kids from the Midwest going up to Boston, that's considered far away. How did Boston College shape you?
Yes. So I guess I was in the minority wanting to go to Boston College and the group of friends and just the people surrounding me because many people stayed in the Midwest. So looking back, maybe that was one of the first steps that I took that was sort of outside of the box, but like not too far outside of the box. Like
Right.
Boston College is another, a pretty comfortable place to go and a wonderful school. But I had, as much as Glendale was an idyllic place to grow up, I also had a lot of challenges growing up and had a lot of angst during my teenage years. And I felt like I needed to get out. I had not really explored parts of the rest of the world. I'd never left the country for sure and just traveled a little bit within the US, but I felt like there needs to be more out there. And so Boston College was the first step to figure out what else is out there beyond St. Louis, Missouri.
What was your major?
Psychology.
What did you imagine doing with that?
I didn't know. I was, as I said, I had some angst about my upbringing and just my life and personal struggles that I had. So it was like I wanted to try to figure out life. I had no grand plans beyond that. I thought maybe I would go on to become a psychologist, but I wasn't clear, and I always envied people that were like, I'm going to go be pre-med, I'm going to be a doctor, and this is my path for life. I yearned for that, but I didn't have it. I didn't know what my gifts or strengths were, or
Mm.
really what I should do with my life.
So, like the majority of us, you stumble forward. You shut your eyes and you keep
Mm.
stepping. What drew you out to San Diego?
The beach, that's an easy answer. I mean, Boston is a great place to go to school, a great college town. I had a wonderful experience. June of my senior year during graduation, it was freezing, and I was like, this is it, I'm done. Freezing, relatively speaking. I'm in Bozeman right now, but it was freezing for June and in Boston. And I had always wanted to live by the beach. That was sort of a dream of mine that I didn't know how it would come into fruition. So I moved with a friend from school, and she was from Boston. And when we got out there, I was like, this place is amazing. I'm never leaving. And she was like, I don't like it here. Boston is the best. And she moved back to Boston 4 months later. For me, I stayed. I got involved in the triathlon community there, and the weather. I mean, I don't know if you've been to San Diego, John, but the weather is just 70 all the time and
So it's
sunny.
it's funny. Right before this podcast, I'm working on a slide deck for a company that I'm partnering with. They're based in San Diego, and their template is the city of San Diego with the water in front of it. And I'm like, man, here I'm working on this deck. It's cold where I am right now, so I get the attraction. So
Yeah.
what were you doing professionally?
Still hadn't figured out my life. So this should give hope to anyone who's maybe in that phase of their life. I found the only job I could. I was doing purchasing for an electronics company, which was nothing I wanted to do or was interested in, but it paid the bills. And then I started to get interested in health and wellness and decided to go back to school and get my master's in exercise physiology. And my plan with that, still not super clear, but I thought I'd get involved with cardiac rehab or corporate wellness, really interested in how exercise and movement impacts our mental health and
Mm.
wellness. And so I did that. At the end of that 2.5 year program, I did an internship at a cardiac clinic, which was still in line with what I was thinking I was going to do. And then life took a really interesting turn. And I got connected to people in the medical device world. So people who were selling pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. I was really fascinated by the technology. It was actually a chance for me to make some money, which I hadn't really I had not been pursuing, the corporate ladder or finances, and this sort of fell into my lap in some ways of it being lucrative along with something that I was passionate about for a while. So I got hired by Boston Scientific and was a clinical device rep for Boston.
Years ago, I had a meeting with a gentleman who was actually very successful in that world. I visited him in the hospital as he was passing away, actually. One of the things he said to me near the end of the conversation is, John, I've made it to the top. I've climbed to the highest rung, only to recognize I had my ladder leaned against the wrong darn wall.
Mm,
And it's so
mm.
often in life that you find this thing that you may not have even been seeking, but then you find it, it's somehow attractive. You're not really that self-aware around even how you're stepping forward and how the days are becoming weeks and months and years and decades, and then it's over. You somehow pull your head away from that long enough to recognize this is good, but I feel there's more for me. Like, what was that process like?
Yes, I mean, it served me for a period of time, and I worked for Boston Scientific for 5 years. And then, similar to what you described with your friend, I felt like there had to be more to life than trying to climb the corporate ladder. And, another big thing was that personally, I still wanted this white picket fence dream. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids and live in the suburbs and have two nice SUVs and a nice home and go to schools like Catholic schools in St. Louis. And that wasn't happening. And I think that is usually a part of our journey too, is that when we're pursuing certain things and doors don't open at a certain point, I had to shift gears. So feeling like unfulfilled in my personal life, and then that leaked into the professional life. And so I went on a journey of seeking, that is what
Mm.
I would say, of seeking something more, of feeling that I there must be a way that God can use the gifts that I have. And calling isn't a word I use so much. It feels bigger sometimes than I think it needs to be. But I think looking back, I was like looking for what was my calling, what was my purpose here on earth. And a big thing for me is that I love kids and I wasn't working with kids. So I got this idea in my head that I wanted to volunteer abroad. And that is the extent of what I thought. I didn't really know where. I didn't do international studies major. I wouldn't say I'm very in touch with different things going on in the rest of the world, but I did have a little bit of a draw to the continent of Africa. Again, a very wide reach,
Pretty big place.
pretty big place, yes. And then something like a lot of things were happening that I can look back and see now how they were fitting together. I did start going to a new church, and there was a woman who talked about volunteering up front, and she worked with a refugee population in San Diego. I felt I want to go somewhere far away, but I also need to recognize that at my back door there are needs. So through that experience with my friend Sherry Briggs, I started volunteering with a refugee community in San Diego, which included a lot of Africans, Kenyans, Ugandans, Congolese people. And then a friend of a friend got me connected to a nurse who was working in Kenya.
Wow.
And I applied for an opportunity to go for 1 month. I had earned enough keep in my job that I could ask. And I said, I want to go do this for a month. And can I have my job when I get back? And they were like, absolutely, no problem. Go do it. Come back and we'll welcome you. And so that's what I did, thinking I would go there and never go back again, that I would get this angst out of my system and figure out what was bothering me have a chance to give back and then just come back and return to my quote unquote normal life
So that's
plan.
arrived in Kenya. And as you said, when I was with you last, and then you got rocked.
Mm.
So let's talk about that. You land in Kenya, which is different than San Diego, apparently. What was your first experience like with Kenya?
That's a great question. My first experience was incredible, so positive and welcoming and warm. I was brought to this, well, I was volunteering and staying at a place called Chibaiwa, which is a small village in Western Kenya with another organization that was already pretty established. And Kenyans love visitors.
Mhm.
They are so hospitable. They will drop everything that's going on in their life to welcome a visitor. So I was welcomed with singing and and just open arms and excitement that I was there, and I was blown away. I mean, I was very nervous about going, and now I've become so comfortable. Like, I was a big runner at the time. I didn't even bring my running shoes because I was like, for sure it's not safe for me to run, like I had no idea what to expect. It was a very, foreign place to me. And when I got there, I was like, oh, this is incredible. It is safe and people are very welcoming. And so that was my first experience. And that was at a children's home that had already been around about 10 years. They had a lot of Westerners coming and going, and they took really good care of me. And then the other thing that happened in that month is that the purpose of me being there was to work with this nurse in a slum community. And this slum community is about 15 minutes from this village where I described, and very, very different than this village. It's a place where people are really suffering, and I was especially disturbed by the suffering of children. So these are people who have been displaced from their homes for different reasons or are there for different complex social reasons. It's government land that people are squatting on, and there's no access to running water, there's no access to electricity. Getting clean water is really difficult for most people there. There's limited access to healthcare, and a lot of kids are in and out of school. Another big problem that I was exposed to there is alcoholism, which is a part of the cycle of poverty in that community, that they brew a grain alcohol. And this brings a lot of other challenges, especially for the safety of children. So, this was my first experience with anything like that,
Right.
of what I just described. I'd never experienced anything like that.
We'll talk about the alcohol in a moment. I was surprised in our last conversation about how young many folks who begin drinking are and what that drug will do to them in the short term and in the long term for their lives. It's it's incredible. For you, though, as you're arriving from San Diego into Kenya, into this relatively safe, beautiful singing community. You're there
Mhm.
for several days, and then you go to the slum community. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? What was it like for you just to experience this for the first time? Something that none of us, at least in the Western world, can imagine, and you're stumbling into probably ill-equipped.
Yeah. Well, the first thing we were helping with was there were children and adults who were suffering from a problem called jiggers. These are tiny little fleas that get inside of people's feet in areas of poor sanitation and for people who don't have shoes. And so that was also something didn't know anything about. I saw a lot of suffering, kids who were in a lot of pain, a lot of children who did not have proper supervision, who weren't being cared for. Yeah, I had a chance to connect to some of the children. People in that community speak Swahili. Swahili is the language that Kenyans speak, Swahili
Mhm.
and English, but in this community, it's mostly Swahili. So at that point, I couldn't really communicate so much. I was disturbed that people were living in these conditions. The conditions are really terrible. Many of the houses are dilapidated and falling down. And there's a feeling of darkness and hopelessness in that community that is really overwhelming.
Can you feel that as an outsider when you step in there? Can you feel the weight of despair?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned alcohol. Tell our listeners and viewers about that.
Yes, I think it's an important thing to explain because a lot of people, or some people will ask alcohol, well, how can people afford alcohol? It's not, the Bud Light that you might share with a friend in St. Louis, but it is a grain alcohol that they use rotten corn, and they put all sorts of chemicals in it to make it extremely potent. So a person may spend 40, 50 cents for a tiny amount, and that gets people bombed, not functional. And not to mention it's incredibly dangerous. It causes blindness. It kills people. The Swahili word for the alcohol that they drink is changa, and it literally is translated into kill me quick.
Wow.
And so it it is part of the cycle that I mentioned of poverty. Joblessness is a big problem in this community, depression and hopelessness. And so it's a coping mechanism that people use to deal with life, turns into addiction for many people. And the other part of it is that it's a big business. So it is a quick money maker. And so there's another element of it where some mamas and grandmas are doing this as a business in order to feed their families. So, and it, as you can imagine, it creates a lot of problems for children.
Yeah.
The neglect that happens, it leads to a lot of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, and then early exposure to alcohol for kids.
And what does that lead to?
That leads to addiction, that leads to not being in school and being stuck in the cycle of poverty with very few opportunities to get out. There's kids whose parents, grandparents, great grandparents have lived in this community. And there's a lot of compassion that I have and we have as Beam for how hard it is to get out of that cycle.
So, Colin, I was thinking of your story and the times in my life where I've done something hard in service of others, and how when it's over, I'm grateful I did it, but very rarely do I feel like, and now I need to go back and do it again. It's almost
Mm,
like, yes, now back to my life, which is not me bragging. Trust me, it's the exact
mm.
opposite. You spend a month over there in a slum and in service and meeting these kids and hearing this song and being moved by their faithfulness, but also by their struggle. And then you go home. And rather than checking a box and saying, man, I'm glad I did that. Now I can go back to medical sales successfully in my life and run triathlons and live my journey. You felt almost like this gnawing on your heart to go back and serve again. We talk about that.
Yes, some of that I cannot explain. I mean, we've hosted a lot of people who have visited and not necessarily been moved for whatever reason in that way. And for me, it was very different. After that month, I knew I was going to come back. I didn't know in what capacity. I never imagined I would live there, start an organization, but I knew that I had been exposed to this problem for a reason and that it would be harder for me to pretend like I didn't see what I saw than to uproot my life. And so, I think like most of us, it was like the next right step. The next step felt like I have to figure out what I can do to gather some support for this community while I'm in the US and then figure out what it can look like to go back. And so over time, I stayed in touch with some people in Kenya. I stayed in touch with the original organization and um, I prayed a lot. I continued to seek. I watched your movie a couple days ago, John, and a couple times in there for various reasons, there was a question of like, why me? And I think that question we can ask we can look at that from different perspectives, right? But I was like, why me? Why is this still bothering me? Why can I not move on with my life? And what can I do? So I had some great mentors. I had incredible support from my family, and I decided the next step would be to go to Kenya for 1 year. So this meant quitting my job. And some people thought I was crazy, and other people were like, go for it. I was so focused and driven by the need and what I had saw that I was like, I'm doing this, and I wasn't going to be swayed by what other people thought. I was nervous. I didn't grow up, in a really like mission-based home where raising funds to live was part of our
Right.
vocabulary. I was raised to like get a job and pay your bills, and then you give back to other organizations, right? So I ended up, my boss at my job was incredible, and they gave me like 6 months to still work, but spread the word about Beam. And I needed to raise $12,000 to live there for the year. That would help me live there and then also support some of the programs I wanted to do. And I raised $50,000 in a few months. And that was confirmation for
Mm,
me that I could get people to care about what had moved me. And so that
wow.
was the next step.
That's so awesome. So you go over there for a year. As you look back on that 365-day journey, which will become a little bit longer, what did you do really well? And then what did you do looking back on it very poorly?
The best decision I made by far is that I started to learn Swahili. And for anyone that wants to live for more than a few weeks in another culture where they speak a different language, I think that that is the most wise advice. It helped me to connect with people. It helped me understand what was going on. It earned me some street cred, and people would be surprised when I would be on the public transportation. Maybe they would try to cheat me out of like a few cents or inflate the price, and I would speak in Swahili and say, "No, I know what the price of this is." So,
And by the, for our listeners, I know some of us are viewing us right now, but for our listeners, I'm speaking with this fair-skinned, blonde, beautiful Midwestern American who is now living in Kenya, speaking Swahili. It would be the last thing I'm sure any of those folks would expect from you, and yet here you are speaking their language. So you've earned a
yes,
little street cred through this.
absolutely. So that was a good decision and continues to be. And also, I mean, there were things that I didn't do well, for sure. The drive and passion that I just shared about sometimes can be aggressive in that culture. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to know how I could help. And I think there are some things that I could have done slower and more patiently. Change takes time, and patience is not necessarily a strength of mine, but it's critical in this work and also in the Kenyan culture. They're incredibly patient. And,
Yeah.
it's a privilege sometimes, I think, in our American culture that we don't have to be patient, right? Like we get to a doctor's appointment and they're on time, and we drive up to Target, they bring us our stuff out, like so we don't have to really be patient here. And Kenyans, they've learned to be patient. And so I could have gone slower with some things.
That's awesome. Tell me about faith. You shared the story with us when we were at your fundraiser, and it moved me deeply then. It moved me deeply preparing for today's podcast. I'm sure it's going to move our listeners. So, who is Faith?
So when I committed to go for a year, I didn't really have clear direction in terms of what I was doing, but this organization welcomed me to spend some time in this slum community. And that's what I did. I did a lot of visiting homes and trying to get to know people. And we would do children's programs. And what that meant is that, usually once a month, we would go to the center of the community and we would invite kids for singing and dancing. And one of our Kenyan friends would share a little Bible verse and story, and we would have a little snack. And it didn't feel like much, but it was something that we were trying to do to build relationship with the community. And during one of those programs, this would have been December of 2013, I met Faith, and I have this picture of myself sitting outside of this little church where we would run these programs. And Faith and I bonded, we connected. She spoke better English than most of the other kids that I had been meeting, and I didn't speak a lot of Swahili at the time. So that was a connection that we had, was just her ability to speak. Speak English, and I was like, she's really bright. I noticed that right away. She was 15 years old at the time, and she had said, I really want to go to school. When I was in first and second grade, I was the top of my class. I loved school. And then my mom couldn't afford to pay for my fees. And so there's this thing that happens with the schools there, that kids get chased away from school, is what they say in Swahili. So they might show up for school and maybe they've been going the previous 2 weeks, but it's an exam day and they haven't paid their exam fee. And so they send them home. So Faith was in and out of school and really wanted to go back to school. I was very naive at that point, which looking back, I think served me
Yeah.
because I didn't understand the complexity of what Faith had been through in her young life. I think the hope that comes from being naive can be powerful sometimes. So I called my mom. I said, there's this girl. We need to get her in school. I didn't have a program, I didn't have an organization. Bean Kenya didn't exist at that point. I said it would be $800 for her to be in boarding school for the year and to get all of her supplies. And, will you send me the money? And my mom is incredible. And she was like, sure. She didn't really ask so many questions. She knew it was important to me. And so it became important to her. So this village that we've talked about, where people welcomed us, there was a private Christian boarding school in that village. And that was a place that kids like Faith went to receive high quality education in a safer environment. So we brought Faith to school. And from there, the journey started off wonderful. And, the problem that I saw initially was just that kids weren't in school and they needed to be in school.
Right.
And the problem is much more complex than that. So Faith did well in school for a year. And when a child is in boarding school, they are in school for about 9.5 to 10 months out of the year. And then they have holidays throughout the year where they go home. And that was the option for Faith on the school holiday, was for her to go back to the slum. Her mom was around a little bit, but not super involved in her life. And her dad had passed away many years prior. And when Faith went back for the long holiday, she just understandably, in so many ways, and I say this with a lot of compassion for her, she just got sucked right back in. She had been exposed to alcohol from a very young age, and she had suffered abuse and a lot of trauma. And she just slipped right back in. And we,
Mm.
over the next few years, myself and some other Kenyans who I started working with tried a lot to get her back in school, and she couldn't. She would try and then she would run away. And it was a really difficult journey with her.
So Faith is this child who you fall in love with, and she falls in love with you, and she's got this dream of going back to school. You make a phone
Mhm.
call. Mom believes in you, so she believes in Faith. $800 flow in. She goes off to school, gets the uniform, gets the textbooks, gets the class to go to, and the bed to sleep in. And then this all begins to fade. What becomes of Faith's life?
Yeah, so eventually Faith had a child. In 2016, she had a child who's now actually a scholar in our program. And so we try to support her through that journey, help her get sober, and all attempts didn't work. She was just so heavily into the throes of addiction. So we were able to help her son, and then we watched her life really deteriorate, and it was incredibly painful. I had become really close with her, and I mean, I still didn't have kids at that point, and so Faith felt like a daughter to me in many ways.
Right.
And so eventually she got into some really terrible relationships, and it's another complex story, but in 2021 she was killed. And that, I mean, rocked my world again in another way that, I mean, I have so many questions for God whenever I get there, hopefully. Her name was Faith. I mean,
Right.
come on, this could have been like a great story. I when I met her, I thought she was going to change that slum. I knew that it wasn't going to be me, that it needed to be a Kenyan. And I had, like a parent has for their child, I had a lot of hopes and dreams for her. And I thought this story was going to turn out a really different way. And so, it was years even before she passed away that I wrestled with that of like, really, this is how this story is going to go. So that was a hard thing. It still is a hard thing to wrestle with.
For sure.
And yet faith opened the door for so many people. Today, we have over 130 children who we've provided academic scholarships for, and it was because of that meeting with faith. So God uses things and people in unexpected ways. And so he has used Faith's life
Mm.
to catapult the work of Beam, and to understand that aside from education, mental health support is critical to increase the chances that a child will stay in school.
So, Colleen, when I write, if I'm writing well, or when I speak, if I'm speaking well, I'll oftentimes end a difficult paragraph or story with the words, and yet. I think it's a really cool way to pivot forward into a new direction. You're describing the agony of losing your daughter. I mean, essentially, this is one of your first loves over in Kenya. She's the poster child for the work you're doing, and yet it doesn't work out the way you expect. It works out in agony, and yet it has led to this new beginning for you, for Beam. So I guess we're going to pivot forward a little bit. You meet a woman eventually named Olive. Who
Mhm.
is Olive, and how did Olive help you start Beam?
Yes. So Olive is a co-founder of Beam. I met her in 2016. This is when I was sort of going back and forth between the States and Kenya at this point, and toying with the idea of starting a nonprofit in the US, establishing an organization in Kenya. And Olive is the niece to a Kenyan mentor of mine who I'd been working closely with. She has a social work background, and I was sort of floundering, trying to figure out what I was doing. And he said, "You need someone as a partner in this work." I met Olive and I was like, "I don't have a lot to offer you financially, but I'll give you something. And can we work together to see what we can do to support some of these kids?" And Olive was my person. Olive is incredibly driven in the fight for justice for children, and caring for them and protecting for them and advocating for their rights. So she started in 2016, and we gradually started bringing more scholars in. So Faith was the first, and then we brought three more young kids after that, and then it was five more, and eventually it grew. I think one of the best things that was advised to me, really modeled for me, was the importance of having Kenyan leadership. And it does me being a white person and being at the front and center of things, which I was initially, complicates some things sometimes. And so Olive, starting to lead the way was really important. And that grew to a bigger Kenyan team. But she has really been an integral piece in being beginning and being growing. And she has sacrificed a lot in order for kids to get the right to go to school and be supported in their mental health.
You've said that a bunch, mental health, when at first you said, and John, we were trying to get them into school. Why is mental health so important as you get them into school, as they now pour a new, firmer foundation to leap from?
It's incredibly important. I mean, it's a big topic, I think, in the US, and also becoming a more talked about topic in Kenya. I think that it is unfair to make the assumption that taking a child out of a very difficult environment and putting clean clothes on them and putting them in school and saying, "All right, there you go. You have everything you need. Now you should graduate from college," right? That doesn't feel fair. The reality is that some will be fine. In our experience, a small percentage whether it's biologically, they're already incredibly bright, or they have some support at home. Some will do okay, but majority with the backgrounds that they have, the trauma that they've been through, the challenges that they need to overcome to stay in school are so many that it's critical to provide extra support. And not just to increase the chances that they'll stay in school, but also that they'll become healthy and whole individuals and productive members of the Kenyan society who eventually give back. That is our hope. So mental health, I mean, I love education, and it's you have to me, you have to have both. Ensuring a child stays in school is critically important. And also, I feel very passionate about the mental health services that we provide.
How many children are you helping right now?
So, in terms of the kids that we're helping go to school, we have 106 active scholars in our program. We've helped 130 over the last 8 years. And then our counseling services, just this year alone, we've helped over 5,000 children and their families. So we have four licensed professional counselors. They're all Kenyan, and they actually work in the public schools around the slum community. And they go there once a week and they provide counseling services. And that is a program that we're incredibly proud of.
You mentioned the story of faith and the tragic ending of it. Would you share, just because you hear numbers like 5,000 or 130 children in school, and it's easy to get lost in the macro. Share one story of one child who, when you hold their hand or you look at them, you realize, my gosh, if it was only for this one, it's all worthwhile. So share one story of one child.
Mm. Yes, I mean, I'll share a story of a boy named Elijah who I met in the slums in 2016. So he's not a young child now, but he was then. And I remember Elijah very clearly. I mean, I was meeting like hundreds of kids and trying to learn names, but having such a hard time. I have pictures I took then that I can go back and look on. But Elijah was a young boy. I think he was probably 10 at the time. And he was selling rabbits. He was breeding and selling rabbits in this slum community in order to try to get a few dollars to stay in school. He was being taken care of by what we would call a good Samaritan or another community member because his mom and grandmother, his main caregivers, had passed away within a month of each other. And he was left by himself with his younger sister.
Wow.
And I mean, it's incredible to see, like, you could see something special about Elijah, right? That he didn't speak English, he didn't have a strong academic foundation, but here he was driven to get just a few dollars in order to stay in school, and clearly a businessman. Eventually, we were able to get Elijah in our program. He started in sixth grade and had not had much formal schooling before that. And he finished eighth grade. When he finished eighth grade, he was about 17 years old, which is not so uncommon with the scholars that we work with. He had learned some math skills, a little bit better reading and writing, and he went on to a technical school for construction, for masonry specifically. Elijah has been employed. He's working right now, he's actually working in Nairobi in the big city on a building project there. He is taking care of himself and also helping other members of his family. And the power that can come and the change that can happen when you recognize one child. The trajectory of Elijah's life has been changed because of the support of the entire Beam Kenya community. And those are the really joyful things to be a part of and to witness. It's a great privilege to witness journeys of people like Elijah.
You've talked a little bit about your faith and then the faith of the Kenyans. How has the Kenyan church, not the
Mm,
building, but the people, changed your own perspective on faith?
mm. Yes, Kenyans have to, or they choose to rely on their faith in different ways. Kenyans often are relying on God for their daily bread. for the rain in order to get and for their crops to grow in order to get enough food for the upcoming season. There's a lot that we have to learn from people living in the developing world and their faith because they don't have all the comforts that we have. And so there's an innate reliance on God for many things. We don't have as many opportunities in the Western world, just in my experience, let me say, to have that desperation for God because we're so comfortable most of the time, most of us, not all of us. And when we're comfortable, we can forget that we need to rely on God.
Mm.
So we have so much to learn from others. And I have learned a lot from the Kenyan community and their faith. Another big thing that I just love is that they love to sing. It's not that the person who has studied singing in college and they're the ones up on the stage and they're professionals. It's that anyone can get up and sing at any time. Many of them just have beautiful voices when they sing a cappella, and it's really incredible. It's been a really healing part for me personally living in Kenya, and I think that it's a part of the healing that their community has as well.
So we're talking about the work that you're doing. How do people learn more about the work you're doing and how they can get involved either through their time or through their investment of dollars?
Yes, thanks for asking, John. So people can go onto beamkenya.org. That's our website. Beam is BEAM, Kenya, KENYA.org. That's our website. I'll mention Beam also has two meanings. One is we talked in the very beginning about how the slums has a feeling of darkness that is palpable when you're there. And so our hope is to bring light into that community. And that's the beam of light is what we hope to bring. Beam also stands for boost, educate, advocate, and mend. So beamkenya.org is how you could learn more about what we do. There's a link on there to donate. We accept cash gifts and non-cash gifts is another way that people can give, whether that's through a donor advised fund or a stock donation. All the information is there. And we're on social media. We're on Facebook. If you look up Beam Kenya, we're on Instagram. Those are ways that people can follow the work we do, share it with others. We are always looking for financial partners. We invite your friends in this community to partner with us financially to help fill in the gaps for some of these kids and give them their right to go to school and to be mentally whole and healthy. And then the other thing I'll say is that I am now a part of a Kenyan family. My husband's Kenyan and our kids are Kenyan Americans, and we love to host people. So, if you're interested in visiting us in Kenya and seeing the work that we do firsthand, and also coupling it with a safari, which is a really popular destination, the Masai Mara in Kenya, then we'd love to host you. So, you could send me an email. It's just Colleen@beamkenya.org, Colleen @beamkenya.org, and reach out if you're interested in visiting Kenya. We're trying to get you to come, John. Where are you at with that?
I bought my tickets. Here's where I really am at. My dear friend and now yours, Alan Arkowitz, went with his wife Bethany and children. And this is a family from the Midwest who dragged their kids onto a long flight, thinking it would be something nice to do for Colleen and her organization. And they came back changed. Yes, they saw giraffes and zebras and had a wonderful time, I guess, out there in the bush. But more importantly, they saw children and they saw families and they saw something they weren't expecting. In the midst of despair, they saw joy. And so that this changed every one of their lives. And then Alan came back and said, let's support this little fundraiser being held in Kirkwood. So I invited a couple of friends. Beth, my wife, and I went. We are now investors in your organization. We believe in the work you're doing. And what I would say to anyone listening to our conversation is a little goes a very, 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 very long way in Kenya. And if you think you can't change a life, you're a liar. You're kidding yourself. Through a little bit of generosity, you can change the life of one child or dozens of children in Kenya. And how could you not take that opportunity? So I encourage my family is aware and supportive of beamkenya.org. And I encourage all of our families who are listening, why not get engaged? And if not being for some reason, then another organization that has you turn your worldview away from the mirror staring back at you, reminding you how miserable life is. It is amazing what happens when your world becomes a little bigger, how your struggles become a little smaller. So there's my long answer on how are things going for my travel to Kenya. I don't know when I'm coming, but I'm already invested.
Thank
And
you, John. Yeah. And you're so right. That's why you inspire others. Whether it's Beam Kenya or another organization, it is very clear to me that we are supposed to be here to extend a hand to others in need. And people should feel inspired to figure out what that means in their life. As you said, stop looking at the mirror and look to those around you. Open your heart and mind to the needs around you. In turn, you will also be given so much.
totally. So, a final question before we pivot into the Live Inspired 7. You lived in San Diego in a condo near the beach with nice running shoes as you did your triathlon in your triathlon community with your Boston College degree hanging up perfectly on the wall.
Yeah.
You now find yourself waking up in Kenya on a farm,
Mhm.
married to a Kenyan farmer who now works within the Beam organization with two little ones. As you look at the life you're living now and the life you lived 15 years ago, what are you most grateful for the life you currently have?
I'm so grateful for my husband and my kids that I get to be a mom. That is one of my greatest joys. And that I get to be involved in work that I'm really passionate about. I'm incredibly grateful. I never imagined I wanted to live on the beach. If you're still with us from the beginning of this podcast, I never wanted to live on a farm. But that's what happens when you step outside of your comfort zone, is that life surprises you in the best possible ways.
Hmm. Well, there's a little Albanian nun who was on her way, I think, to the UK on a train and made a southbound turn to India. And in doing so, she changed the life of one child and then another and then another. And when Mother Teresa passed away, I think her organization was supporting 30 million orphans. How do you change the world? I don't have a clue, but I know it's done one life at a time. And Colleen, that's exactly what you're doing. So let's begin moving to the finish line, which our listeners know is really
Thank
the
you.
starting line. Live Inspired 7 always begins with the first question. What's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Barking to the Choir by Father Greg Boyle.
Did you
I,
say barking to the choir?
yeah, by Father Greg Boyle. He's a Jesuit priest in LA that works with ex-gang members. And he reminds me of a lot of the way the Mother Teresa is spoken about and speaks. He talks about a circle of compassion where we're all together, that we care about each other. And it's not that some people are in and some people are out, but he's incredibly inspiring. So I think you'd like him. I would encourage you to check it out.
Well, I read Homeboys or whatever the first book was, but I haven't read Barking to the Choir. So you've just sold a book to John O'Leary today. What's one positive characteristic or one trait you possessed as a little girl growing up in Glendale, Missouri, that
Mhm.
you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today in Kenya?
Oh, I think just being unabashedly myself. My daughter is 3 years old, and just the other day, she put on a dance party for us. And I was like, that was probably what I was like when I was three. She had her speaker and was singing and didn't care at all what anyone thought about her. And so, yeah, I'm continuing to try to get back to that 3-year-old self and just live unabashedly as myself.
This is unrelated to your, well, it's tied to your answer, but it's not a question for you. One of the beautiful things you did at the fundraiser is you had Piper, Alan's daughter and Bethany's daughter, speak about her experience in Kenya. And as you were talking about your daughter dancing at age 3, and as you're talking about how that's who you were, it reminded me of this little girl standing in front of a group of 80 or so, maybe potential investors, and just the joy in her eyes as she unabashedly shamed her joy for Kenya and why people should get engaged. It was awesome. So
Oh, it
Piper,
was
if you're listening,
incredible.
it really was awesome.
Yes, so grateful for Piper. And she, just a quick side note, that she had practiced and she had note cards. And her mom told me that after, when she was about to go up and speak, she was like, threw her note cards and was like, if Colleen didn't use note cards, I'm not using note cards. And like, go Piper. Yeah. I mean, she was confident and she knew what she was asking for. And yeah, we hope for more Pipers in this world.
Right on. If your home caught fire and your husband, who I've met, and your kids, who I've met, are all out safely, and you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item, what's that one thing that you would grab?
I mean, I'm going to be practical and go with passports. That'd probably be number one. And then my phone has all my pictures on it, thousands. So that would be my pictures from, especially from the early years of Kenya. So I don't know how inspiring that answer is, but my passports and my phone, I would want to make sure I had.
It is very pragmatic and practical. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone, living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to Father Greg Boyle. I would love, and he's still alive. So I don't know if he's listening and can make that happen. But yeah, Father Greg Boyle, Mother Teresa, and my great grandmother, maybe sitting with all three of them, with my grandmother, my dad's mom, and just soak in their wisdom and the peace with which they seem to live their life despite hard things that have happened.
So Father Boyle and Saint Mother Teresa, I understand why you chose them. Why your grandmother?
My grandmother died when I was in second grade, so I don't have so many memories of her. I mean, I have memories of her, but not of having in-depth conversations, right? Because I was so young. She was incredibly generous and cared deeply about the poor and cared deeply about others. They lived in St. Louis. She grew up in Florissant. And, she was in a similar environment of me that not everyone around her cared deeply about the poor. And she was radically generous.
Mm,
It's one thing to be generous, and it's another thing to be radically generous. That's a legacy that I think was started by her, and I want to know more about and continue to be inspired by.
that is so convicting. This call to radical generosity. So what's the best advice you've ever received?
Acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today.
Say that one more time, please.
Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Have you heard that before, John?
No, I mean,
No.
I'm familiar with the concept, but not word for word.
Yeah, there's a prayer actually called the acceptance prayer. Um, a story for another time is that I've been involved in some in the 12 steps of the uh, anonymous programs. I don't know if you are familiar with those, not Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was involved in another program. And there, part of that program, there is a prayer called the acceptance prayer. And just the first part
Mm,
of it is that acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. And that means that, like, let go of control. I don't control other people. There's a lot actually that I don't control. But if I can accept what is, then I can live more peacefully.
that's good. What advice would you give to that sophomore Boston College girl looking out her dorm window at the life ahead?
That all things are going to be used for a reason. The hard things, the good things, the privilege, the painful things, that God's going to work them all together for a purpose. And I didn't know that then, but now I do. And I feel incredibly grateful for that.
Colleen Costigan, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
Our small, scary steps led to fearless leaps of faith.
You had to have rehearsed that, man. That is so good. Tell me what that
Well,
means.
so I'll tell you about that. I used to have a blog. It was called The Humbled Warrior. It's not up anymore. Now most of my writing goes through Beam, but the tagline for my blog was small, scary steps lead to fearless leaps of faith. And so I did, I thought about this question because people say a lot like, oh, you're so brave or you're so adventurous. And I don't really feel that way. I love the comfort of my home and routine. Like, I don't feel adventurous or brave. But what I have done is I've taken small, scary steps. And that is what has eventually led me to be able to take bigger leaps, one small step at a time, not knowing what I'm doing, and then that turning into bigger things like starting a nonprofit, which is not anything I planned to do or wanted to do or knew anything about. And I've learned along the way. And that's why I was able to take that leap.
Colleen Costigan, Executive Director of beamkenya.org, sister, daughter, mother, spouse, great friend, and great advocate for the poor. I want to thank you for being part of our Live Inspired podcast and for really modeling our message through the gift of your life. It has inspired me.
Thank you so much, John. It's a great privilege to be here. And thank you for caring about the work that we do and advocating for the Beam children in Kenya. We're so grateful.
My friends, that is the voice and the testimony of Colleen Costigan. My name is John O'Leary. Today is our day. What a gift. What a gift. Live inspired. My friends, I told you on the front side, you were in for an inspirational treat with Colleen. And if this story reminds you that a single yes can redirect the entire course of your life and create a ripple effect that is unimaginable, not only in your life, but also in the life of others, and you're looking to keep that journey going forward, let me introduce you to another friend. I think you'll love this episode as well. His name is Scott Harrison. Scott is the founder of Charity Water. He's on a mission to bring clean water, safe drinking water to everyone everywhere. And yet, as so often is the case, his journey is also one of redemption and purpose. In listening to Scott's journey, it will remind you that big change is possible, that the best really is yet to come, and that one small step can lead to another one, and it can ultimately not only change your world, but the world. It's an incredible episode as well. You can tune in at episode 104, or you can just walk on over with me right now to the Live Inspired podcast at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. We'll have a link right there in the show notes for Scott Harrison's episode. My friends, if you haven't lately subscribed or liked the podcast where you tune into it, let me encourage you to do so right now. It will ensure that these beautiful episodes end up in your feed week after week. So please do subscribe to the podcast and like it. It's a great way for us to magnify and multiply the impact of our messaging. I want to thank you for being part of that messaging, part of our community. And I want to remind you, my friends, in the midst of struggle, that the foundation is firm. The headwinds we face may be real, but the best is yet to come. So for this time, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is our day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.